The mysterious epidemic that terrified Henry VIII. Sweating sickness made its appearance in the summer in England of 1485, with a further 5 repeated outbreaks before completely disappearing in England. It was a highly contagious disease which stole the lives of hundreds of people once it reached the towns of England. The people were lucky to survive with half of their population still intact, and the people had not long survived the Black Death before this new epidemic swept the nation. But the newness of the disease terrified people of all classes due to the speed in which it killed people. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. In 1528, Henry VIII was driven to some strange sleeping habits that included sleeping in a different bed each night. Despite having his mistress and his wife's lady-in-waiting, Anne Boleyn, he was terrified of catching a disease that swept across England and Europe multiple times during the Tudor period. The king was terrified of the sweating sickness, a deadly epidemic that is nearly forgotten today. The strange epidemic started in 1485 and it still baffles the scientific community today. Europe was plagued 5 times with no evidence of the epidemic's origin, as well as the identity of the disease. The sweating illness started without warning and was unpreventable despite people trying their best not to catch it. A feeling of dread would take over the sick person before the headaches, neck pains, weakness, and a cold sweat covered their entire body. Fever, heart palpitations, and dehydration followed. Within 3 to 18 hours, 30 to 50% of people afflicted with the illness were dead. The origin of the sickness that was killing hundreds of people throughout Europe is rumoured to have been brought to England by the mercenaries Henry's father hired to seize England's throne for him and his son. These foreign soldiers that ended the War of Roses in 1487 had been blamed for bringing the sickness with them. It was not long before the sweating sickness became a regional epidemic. It was a new kind of sickness, which was so sore, so painful and sharp that the like was never heard of to any man's remembrance before that time. Humans had not long survived the most fearful epidemic between 1346 and 1353. The Black Death was unprecedented and it killed 60% of the world population, killing over 20 million people in Europe alone. The sweating sickness was another epidemic that the world did not want or need. The two illnesses were not related, it caused no skin problems, and the sweating sickness always seemed to appear randomly after a period of extended rainfall or flooding. It did not discriminate between the rich and poor households, and everyone was at risk. People were extremely paranoid of catching this disease, especially rich nobles who believed they were at an even higher risk of the disease than anyone else. It was this idea that meant some people in society could take advantage of the paranoia of the rich realm of folk. One man who did this was Caius. He gave himself an alter ego, calling himself Monarcha Johannes Cos. His alter ego was responsible for treating wealthy English men who, like their monarch, were paranoid of the disease. John wrote a book to further improve his profiteering of this sickly disease. In 1552, he published a sweating sickness book. The book covered the symptoms of the disease and what to look out for, as well as ways to prevent catching it, as well as cures for it. Some of the advice he gave included not eating out of date and rotting fruit, avoiding evil mists, and exercising frequently. He also advised on a number of herbal cures, and he encouraged people to sweat out the illness and avoid going outside. Of course, this is not very good medical advice on reflection with modern medicine, and his advice did not work, but that did not matter because he was making a fortune as people believed that his advice was true. Many royals fled to the doctors, who they hoped could cure them or stop them from getting the disease in the first place. King Henry VIII remained fearful of catching the disease for his entire reign. Many of those closest to him caught the illness, included Henry's advisor Cardinal Wolsey, who surprisingly survived numerous bouts of sweating sickness. Henry's older brother Arthur has been suspected of catching and dying from the sweating sickness. The advisor of Henry, Thomas More, wrote, "One is safer on the battlefield than in the city." The sweating sickness randomly stopped peering its ugly head, and the last known epidemic was in 1551, and then it mysteriously went away, only to return as a different variant in France 150 years later, before disappearing forever. Thousands of people got this disease, sometimes more than once, and thousands died overall, although the exact statistics were unknown due to poor record keeping. Looking back on the accounts of those at the time, medical professionals and scientists today believe that it may have some variant of hantavirus, a rare disease also known as seal virus. Others wonder if flu, food poisoning, or a condition called relapsing fever were to blame. No matter what its cause, sweating sickness truly left its mark. Please continue to support my channel by subscribing. Please comment, like and subscribe if you wish for more stories, and leave your suggestions below and I will endeavour to cover them.